Hey everybody, it's Doug Green and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News, and I am live with Mark Fletcher of 911inform. Mark, thank you for joining me today.
Always good to see you, Doug. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for joining me here at Enterprise Connect, and I think you just did a session here, a panel on 911.
Yeah, I was just on Erwin Lazar's panel that we do every year for the past, decade or so. And this year we changed it from 911 or E911 to next generation 911 deployments for the enterprise.
So what was that all about? I mean, at this point, don't the enterprises have 911 all clocked and figured out?
Well, a lot of them have 911, basic 911,
right.
E911 services. Some still don't, or they've only done a partial remediation. So Kerry's Law, got to be able to dial 911 directly. That's fairly easy, dial plan fix. But some of the newer laws require dispatchable location to be provided to the public safety answer points or PSAPs. So they haven't gone through that side of it. Of course, mobility complicates that matter. As people work from homes or are nomadic on the road, that can become challenging. So not always good compliance levels there.
Now that's interesting. And we were talking about that, you mentioned that there's certain challenges even now, as long as 911 has been out there, that enterprises face certain challenges, questions that they need to overcome.
Oh yeah. So, there's two things I always say, Doug. It's the police department are great at maintaining the law. They're not telecom experts. They don't understand that. And telecom experts are great at keeping your PBX running or your MLTS, but they're not legislative experts. There are some out there in the industry that are specifically PBX lawyers, and those are the people that you need to be talking to for legislative requirements.
And those are complex. In other words, and do they, in fact, they're not just federal, they vary state to state, even maybe county to county?
Well, not so much county to county. There are some state laws because that's what was there prior to any federal legislation, which is the stuff that I introduced back with initially Kerry's Law and then the Ray Bombs Act. And then that was all codified under the Telecommunications Act. And then in place in 2020. So you had states doing things, and there may be some disparity on what they call off. But generally, the federal legislation covers everything, and you don't have to be really too concerned about states. Some have very precise industry-specific things or specific location reporting details. They'll call off a specific square footage. But generally, the federal legislation, as it's written generically, can apply.
So, let's back up a little bit, because for folks that don't know you that well, you're actually one of the people that helped develop the regulatory infrastructure that we live in with regard to 911.
Yeah, so I have been a 911 proponent since, the 90s or even before, especially in the PBX world. And I was always a proponent of direct access to 911 because dialing 9 for an outside line was not an issue that you had to have in modern PBXs. Right? It was all dial plan. And when I was an on-site technician while I worked at Bell Atlantic, people asked me, why do I have to dial 9 before 911? Because there was an issue. I said, well, you don't. And I fixed that. And then as I started working for Nortel and Avaya, I started to get more of a voice in the industry and started to being more of a proponent on this. And then there was a tragic incident in 2013 where Carrie Hunt lost her life out of a Marshall, Texas hotel when her 9-year-old daughter knew to dial 911, had no idea that she needed a 9 before making a call.
Right.
And her mother was murdered.
And that's where Megan's Law came from.
Kerry's Law, yes.
Kerry's Law, yes.
Yep.
And what was the effect of Kerry's Law?
Well, Kerry's Law mandated that you have direct access to 911, and something that I had to lobby very, very hard for. I was kind of shocked at this, but the on-site notification requirement. Someone needs to know that someone has dialed 911. I didn't worry about location discovery, location reporting. Not that that wasn't important, but that required a technology fix.
Right.
And what I wanted to do is keep access clean and available, because if you can't dial 911, nothing else really matters. Knowing that we would bring in the location later. And sure enough, it was only a month later, after the president signed Kerry's law, that the Ray Bombs Act was put on his desk that required dispatchable location and reinforced the direct calling that Kerry's law had introduced.
Now, legislation since then has sometimes embraced or incorporated some of these reforms. Is that right?
Oh yeah, no, it's in the Code of Federal Regulations now, Title 47.
All right.
And all of that was brought together. So they were FCC rules. And again, this is kind of the legal minutia.
Right.
And people get it mixed up. Undoubtedly, they, and I'm not a lawyer by any means. And most lawyers will, thank goodness for that. But you've got FCC rules that were then made laws, and then those laws were codified as Congress brought them into Title 47 of the U.S. Federal Code. And that's where they got assigned their penalties and actually became an enforceable law.
Mark, let's bring us up to date today. So we're here at Enterprise Connected 2025. If you're an IT manager, if you're basically in charge of real-time communications in a large organization, a large enterprise, or you have customers that are, what's your advice? What do they need to know right now?
Well, you need to make sure that your system can dial 911 without an access code. And you need to provide some level of dispatchable location. And how that happens can get a little complex. So, look, I'm a 911 vendor. We make a 911 product. We do a very good job at consulting with our customers. Other vendors do, other vendors don't as well. You have to be careful. So it's best if you start with a consultant that does 911 as part of their practice. There are people out there that have security checkups for 911. They'll tell you where you're not, where you are compliant. They'll look at signage. They'll look at things that are beyond the 911 law. They might be OSHA laws. They might be just regular disability laws. So they'll look at the whole picture and come up with a 911 remediation plan for your business. And that's where you really should start, by understanding. You shouldn't take one person's opinion. And that includes me. I challenge anybody to get a second opinion.
Well, let's include you as we wrap up our podcast today. When do people need 911inform?
Well, 911inform is kind of a unique application that provides Kerry's Law, Ray Bombs compliance, provides Alyssa's Law compliance. If you're a K-12 school, that's legislation in many states now, and it's on the way of becoming a federal legislation. So we provide all of that level of compliance, but we also do what we call emergency event management. So if you have panic buttons, if you have active shooter gunshot detection, if you've got weapons detection on AI cameras, license plate detection, the entire emergency event, which I think is important because more and more 911 calls are moving to calls generated from IoT devices and not by humans. And that's going to be the bulk of the calls. So look at us as a correlation unit that brings all that information together in an intelligent next-gen 911 payload, provides that to public safety in a usable environment.
Mark, I really want to thank you for joining me today here at Enterprise Connect. Where can they learn more about Mark Fletcher and 911inform?
Well, our website is 911inform.com. My podcasts are on fletch.tv. And I also have 911tips.com, where 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I've got a short 5-minute podcast on some 911 tips on various topics.
Well, everyone, don't miss it. Go find it and listen up, because I think it's very useful information. Mark, I'm looking forward to learning more in the future about this, but for now, thank you very much indeed.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Doug.